アレクサンダー博士に変身。
Help me! Help me! Hello?
失礼。As I mentioned in the first module, Ashikaga Takauji established Japan's second shogunate in the Muromachi district of Kyoto. This sparked an influx of samurai from the provinces to the ancient capital, known as Heian at the time. Their presence was not welcomed by the nobles, or kuge, who ostracized the samurai as uncouth ruffians. Perhaps motivated by a kind of cultural inferiority complex, the upper echelon samurai in particular turned their attention to cultivating a sense of decorum and artistic appreciation, and behaving in a more sophisticated way than life in the provinces required. This trend is evident in two developments during the Muromachi period. The proliferation of house codes, which were known as kakun, and the dissemination of manuals outlining special samurai ceremonies and rules of conduct, or buke kojitsu, which trace their origins to the customs of the ancient imperial court. Samurai had already created their own conventions and ceremonial forms during the Kamakura period, but it took on more urgency after their relocation to Kyoto. The content of the manuals included various rules relating to appropriate dress, etiquette for everyday interaction, and general expectations for the ideal warrior. As the term indicates, house codes contained advice for clan members. A common characteristic was concern for balancing martial aptitude with knowledge in the refined arts. That is, an equilibrium between bu, which means martial, and bun, which is letters or the arts. Or you could call it brush and sword in accord. Bun, bu, ryodo. Samurai aspired to be worthy of their supreme position through intellect and civility, although violence was always an effective backup plan. These codes of behavior were primarily written by the clan patriarch to ensure his descendants avoided committing any embarrassing deeds in the warrior community of honor. In his Kakun of 1412, Imagawa Ryoshun, for example, declares, "It is natural that samurai learn the ways of war and apply themselves to the acquisition of the basic fighting skills needed for their occupation. However, it is clearly stated in the ancient military texts, such as the Shishigokyo, the 4 books and 5 classics, that without applying oneself to study of the civil arts, it is impossible to be a worthy ruler." Another well-known kakun, Shiba Yoshimasa's Chikubasho, also urges the ruling class to pay attention to matters of propriety, self-cultivation, attention to detail, and to take care in speech so as not to be thought an ass by others. Yoshimasa, like many of his contemporaries, espouses the importance of being familiar with such diversions as linked verse and playing musical instruments, in addition to the martial arts. A much later house code is the 99 Precepts of the Takeda clan, drawn up in 1558 by Takeda Nobushige. The content is remarkably practical, with down-to-earth advice such as do not praise the enemy for their greatness in front of one's own troops. Or, do not let one's men defame the enemy and thereby enrage them. Or, do not show a weak attitude even in front of relatives or attendants. Another one is, when deploying troops, it is necessary to discern what enemy to make peace with, what enemy to destroy, and what enemy to conquer. And at number 98, always be alert. This house code is contained in an important chronicle that offers fascinating insights into the precarious reality of samurai during the Warring States period. The encyclopedic Koyo Gunkan about the Takeda clan is peppered with practical teachings to ensure survival in a world where today's friend is tomorrow's enemy. The overarching theme of Koyo Gunkan is avoidance of excess. Warriors must never go to extremes, it warned, as balance in everything was paramount. The most obvious task in the Warring States period was to hone military skills, but the Koyo Gunkan also urges that this must be accompanied by compassion. For warriors who navigated the precipice between life and death, such awareness provided the key to survival. In this module, we're going to look at some notable compositions on warrior ideals of the very rough and tumble and chaotic medieval period. It is these works that samurai of the Tokugawa period refer to nostalgically while adjusting to their new role in a more civilized and peaceful time.
Balance is crucial in Bushido, and this is epitomized in the ideal of Bunbu Ryodo. Bu refers to combat and denotes military valor, and Bun implies scholarly pursuits and the arts. The warrior was expected to be skilled at arms and in the arts as well. The term Bunbu Ryodo is often referred to in Japan, even today, although the inference is youth who develop physically through sports while also throwing themselves into their studies. The kind of excellence expected in a modern martial arts practitioner is essentially the same. Strength in body and mind, a rounded, compassionate and affable personality, and a high level of perception and powers of discernment. Muscle-bound ignoramuses fall far from the ideal, regardless of their athletic prowess. The warrior's education demanded a balance. Spiritual, technical, and intellectual cultivation was not considered to be exclusive, but rather integrated components of a single whole.
Apart from two interesting letters, Letter to Nagatoki and the Gokurakuji letter, not much information is available about Hojo Shigetoki in historical sources. He was appointed to the position of Kyoto Deputy Overseer, or Tandai, between 1230 and 1247, and served on the Council of State. Consisting of 43 articles, Letter to Nagatoki was written to his son, called Nagatoki, giving advice when he took over his father's role of Kyoto Tandai in 1247. It deals more with manners and procedures rather than any proposed moral outlook. Advice such as not talking about important matters with unintelligent servants, and never letting them see you in your underwear are somewhat amusing exhortations. But the Gokurakuji letter is more substantial than that. Containing 98 articles, it was composed at the Gokurakuji Temple, located just outside Kamakura, where Shigetoki retired in his twilight years. It also offers directives on correct behavior, and also expounds on a distinct way of life. Both of these letters are characterized as house codes, or kakun. It could be said that Shigetoki was one of the first warriors to embrace the ideal of brush and sword in accord as a defining quality for samurai. A striking feature of the Gokurakuji letter is the emphasis Shigetoki places on Buddhist thought. He describes how the world is impermanent and everything in life is transient and guided by karma. Thus he advises that the warrior be aware of his actions in the present, as they will dictate his future incarnation. He emphasizes compassion as a guiding principle and defends a warrior's liberty to rule, not just through military skill, although this was important, but by his efforts to nurture spiritual qualities and cultivate the mind. He urges his son to be a selfless, faithful servant to his Lord, even if his dedication goes unnoticed. Perhaps symptomatic of his own aging, Shigetoki implores his son to have respect for his elderly parents. For even though our faculties are fading and our behavior has become childlike, a similar fate awaits everyone. After all, the only thing a parent wants is for their son to be a good, upright man. Daughters as well, of course. If forthcoming advice is unwanted, children must be grateful for the grace in which it is given. A warrior chieftain will have to entertain guests and participate in gatherings. At such times, his first consideration is to ensure that others receive more food and drink. He should also avoid peering too intently when passing by a woman's living quarters, and to instruct his subordinates to show the same restraint. Speaking of women, a somewhat unanticipated injunction is to choose ugly prostitutes. This is because any man is in danger of becoming besotted by a beauty and behaving in an excessive, unseemly manner. What's more, it's a sign of inferior breeding and arrogance to speak ill of any woman, irrespective of her station in life. To push one's own opinion on others, no matter how reasonable one believes they are, will not be a cause of injury to the giver, but may well cause hardship or even death to the receiver. Although it may seem harmless enough, reason is not always right. The warrior must be empathetic to the plight of others and rejoice in acts of compassion and spontaneous kindness. This is good karma, even if it is not immediately acknowledged, he said. Moreover, the warrior is advised to never speak badly of other men's foibles, and to always show respect to those of lower rank. What is most regrettable is to treat favourably those deemed to be of value, while ignoring others who are thought to be of little use. A warrior who treats all with respect will himself be respected by his men and the gods.
Hinkaku.
Yoshimasa was the fourth son of Shiba Takatsune, a relation and staunch ally of Ashikaga Takauji. Yoshimasa wrote Chikubasho in 1368 during his second stint of 3 as deputy shogun, or kanrei. He was rated highly as an administrator, as a military general, a poet, and exerted substantial influence in the Bakufu as the voice of reason. Chikubasho is a single volume in which Yoshimasa urges his heirs to shine in both the military and the peaceful arts. In the text, there are minor references to Confucian teachings, but it generally reveals a much stronger Buddhist slant and offers practical and ethical advice to civilize the more violent tendencies of the warrior. He only mentions martial ability briefly, as such matters go without saying. Instead, he accentuates the spiritual and cultural training necessary to govern with a true mind that acts on reason rather than emotion. In this sense, Yoshimasa was possibly the first warrior to write about cultivating the mind. His wisdom notwithstanding, the Shiba clan descended into a bitter succession dispute in the mid-1400s, which contributed to the chaos of the Onin War. Eventually, their lands were confiscated by the Imagawa and Asakura clans, and in 1554, Oda Nobutomo hammered the last nail in the Shiba coffin by killing Shiba Yoshimune. Writing during the contentious Nambokucho period, when 2 rival courts coexisted, Yoshimasa decreed that a warrior must never hesitate to sacrifice his life for an important cause, such as the defense of the emperor. He also reminded his heirs that their actions and reputation would have a lasting influence on their descendants. The warrior must avoid staining his name for all time by desperately clinging to life. Conversely, he warns that disregard for the value of life and treating it as little more than dust and ashes to forfeit it at a time of no consequence is also detrimental to the clan's reputation. Following one's parents' teachings, even if they are flawed, is a curious principle, but was in fact an appeal to ensure that clan traditions are passed on. His attention to the arts, such as music and poetry, is not only for cultivating a vision for compassionate governance, but interestingly, to lay claim to skills that will be admired even when one is too old and decrepit to participate in war and administration. It is finesse in artistic pursuits, he asserts, that fosters cool-headedness to see into the hearts of others. This will, in turn, help you utilize men in positions most suited to them, and is also the fundamental mindset in the military arts. Have the attitude to improve one step at a time, and take care in speech so as not to be thought a fool by others. Furthermore, he cautioned, know that insincerity will lead to loss of control. All things should be fulfilled with singleness of mind. Warriors must be composed and have the measure of others. This is the key to success in military matters. Honor and reputation are valued above all else. A man can achieve standing in society through knowledge in the arts, and so should be schooled in them, regardless of whether he has ability or not. Referred to as Ryoshun after he became a Buddhist priest in 1367, Imagawa Sadayo was a prominent general and strategist. His writings on military matters and ethics were to have a resonating effect on the professional outlook of samurai for centuries to come. Although the shogun Ashikaga Yoshiakira made use of his military guile by dispatching him as his deputy to quell rebellions in problematic regions such as Kyushu, he still found time to write on history, philosophy, and poetry, and he was one of the most influential literary critics and poets of his time. Among his extensive body of work is the Nan Taiheiki, a critical look at historical errors contained in the Taiheiki. Imagawa-jo was a manual for his younger brother Nakaaki on how to conduct himself. It's comprised of 23 harsh observations of his brother's faults, followed by another section in which Ryoshin softens the blow with kinder explanations of what he means. This letter was first extolled as an ethical guidebook for the Imagawa clan, but was destined to become a popular samurai primer, and was even included in the Tokugawa shogunate's compendium of principal house codes compiled as reference material for the formulation of the regime's laws and procedures. It is natural for samurai to learn the ways of war and apply themselves to the acquisition of basic fighting skills. However, as is clearly stated in ancient military texts, without applying oneself to the study of the arts of peace, it is impossible to be a worthy ruler. This is related to Ryoshin's first criticism of his brother, who apparently lacked the intellectual ability required of a leader. Nakaaki was rebuked for his fondness for roaming around the countryside and engaging in frivolous diversions such as falconry and fishing when more serious matters needed attention. Hunting was an important activity in warrior training, but Ryoshin's warning is also related to the purposeless taking of life. This is further highlighted in denunciations of Nakaaki's past deeds of putting petty criminals to death, while showing favoritism to truly obnoxious individuals without discriminating between good or bad behavior in his men. You reward them or punish them arbitrarily. Nakaaki never readily accepted prudent advice. Instead, he bullied his advisors or used unreasonable force to get his own way. He was a gambler and a drinker who neglected clan business, but still harbored delusions of his own cleverness. Ryoshin pulls no punches and finishes by beseeching Nakaaki to look into his own behavior with as much intensity as he does of others. Realize that good and bad resides in your own mind. It is good when people of high and low station gather around you. If you are shunned, even though you plead with them to come, know that it is because of your own wickedness. A negligent warrior lacking in wisdom, skill, and training will be loathed by all. A man of virtue looks for friends who are superior to he, and shies away from those who are not. The samurai must therefore strive to accomplish everything to the best of his ability in civil and military matters, without dropping his guard for a moment, and with the 5 cardinal virtues firmly entrenched in his heart. Ichijo Kaneyoshi, also known as Kanera, was the grandson of Nijo Yoshimoto and the son of Tsunetsugu, both imperial regents. He served as the Grand Minister of State in 1446 and became head of the Fujiwara family in 1447. Kaneyoshi authored works on traditional customs and practices, court rituals, politics, and religion. More than anything, he was a consummate poet, but is remembered mostly as a scholar of classical Japanese literature, such as the Tale of Genji. Kaneyoshi was born in an age of prosperity for aristocrats. His lineage put him at the apex of court culture in Kyoto, but the Onin War and the lawlessness that followed saw much of his effort on the maintenance of cultural mores and traditions laid to waste. He criticized the violence that engulfed his world, a sentiment that can be detected in the following ideas extracted from a letter he wrote to Shogun Ashikaga Yoshinao. Acts of kindness are for alleviating suffering. Acts of compassion are for providing happiness. The wish to relieve suffering and deliver happiness is the heart of the Buddha. In Confucian teachings, this sentiment is called humaneness, or the feeling of love towards other human beings. This is the same as kindness and compassion. Kaneyoshi laments the untold numbers of people from all stations in life who had been ripped from their homes and demoralized through starvation and bitter cold during the previous decade of strife. The people responsible for such thievery, he argues, are bereft of kindness and compassion, and their wicked conduct will catch up with them eventually. But their failure to know this is reprehensible. Vicious actions by men of once respectable and loyal clans brings disgrace to the memory of their ancestors. He said, "Their villainous deeds will also be remembered for posterity, and their descendants will suffer the consequences." As such, every aspect of governance must be just and carefully executed. Of course, all work and no play makes Yoshinao a dull boy. Kaneyoshi encourages him to cultivate his artistic inclination and participate, within reason, in various cultural pursuits. Entertaining guests is also an occasion to be cherished, and exchanging cups of wine is enjoyable, but not to the extent of becoming drunk and disorderly. When you have imbibed enough to realize that you are intoxicated and have lost sight of your basic nature, then it's time to retire. Myriad regrettable offences transpire without prudence at such times. Kaneyoshi entreats Yoshinao to strengthen his faith in the deities and Buddhas, and to do everything in his power to make Japan great again. It is only through piety and a truly compassionate, kind, and humane outlook that success as a ruler is possible. This is also the primary basis of filial duty. Not looking after one's health or not advising one's parents if they do wrong are also violations of filial duty. Attention to this is important because waiving such obligations to your parents will result in your own children doing the same to you. When managing people, the wise ruler must know the difference between respectable and unruly men and treat them accordingly. This is the mark of a just government, practiced with an honest mind. An honest mind is just like a mirror. If a handsome person looks in a mirror, the reflection is stately. When an ugly person looks, the reflection is grotesque. Who is that peering in your mirror? Kurin Kazan. Kosaka Danjo Masanobu was a warrior who served the great warlords Takeda Shingen and his son Katsuyori. Masanobu has traditionally been credited with writing Koyo Gunkan, but its authorship is very much a matter of conjecture. Composed of 20 volumes and 59 chapters, The prevalent theory was that the text was not only compiled in the early 1600s by Obata Kagenori, a renowned military scholar and teacher of Takeda military studies, but that the lion's share was probably written by him as well. Recently, however, scholars think that most of the content was in fact orated by Kosaka. The following section was most certainly a record of Kosaka's words. Kosaka was born into a farming family, but entered the service of Shingen at the age of 16, eventually rising up the ranks to become one of the legendary 24 generals in the Takeda army. The formidable Takedas were eventually decimated during Katsuyori's rule by Oda Nobunaga and his allies, first at the Battle of Nagashino in 1575, and then finally in 1582 at the Battle of Temmokuzan. The book is believed to be an expression of Kosaka's grief as he witnessed the Takeda clan's sudden end following the rout at Nagashino. Riddled with historical inaccuracies because of single-minded adulation of Takeda Shingen and perhaps Kosaka's fading memory, the book has long been considered an unreliable historical source. Nevertheless, there is an abundance of information about the trials and tribulations faced by samurai during the Warring States period, and thus it became mandatory reading for samurai of the Tokugawa shogunate. Koyo Gunkan influenced subsequent manuals addressing the peacetime warrior philosophy through the prominence of Obata's illustrious disciples, such as Yamaga Soko and Daidoji Yuzan, who we will look at in later modules. Koyo Gunkan is often quoted in their works as communicating the essence of Bushido. One of the more interesting chapters discusses 4 kinds of lords whose character traits ultimately lead to the destruction of their clans. It describes their shortcomings and the inevitable process of events that would unfold under their flawed tenure. The tone of Koyo Gunkan is unapologetic in its reverence of Shingen as an exemplary ruler, regarded as the benchmark for reference. How did Shingen differ from other lords? The heart of the matter concerns excess. A constant refrain throughout the Koyo Gunkan is the assertion that balance is critical and extremes are to be avoided at all costs. The book is thus full of examples on the maintenance of equilibrium in a variety of situations. From military strategy and everyday living to the character of a military leader, these examples take the form of admonitions. Taken to excess, this is what will happen. Also contained within its volumes is the Heiho Okugisho, attributed to the legendary Takeda general Yamamoto Kansuke. This document is reputedly one of Japan's earliest martial art essays, offering practical instruction in sword work, spear fighting, gunmanship, and archery. Of particular interest here, Koyo Gunkan is believed to be the first book to ever use the word Bushido. The Myogo volume in Koyo Gunkan is named after an ox with a bladed tail. According to legend, the ox licks its tail because it takes delight in the sweet taste of its own blood. However, if it indulges too much, its tongue will become shredded and the ox will bleed to death. Kosaka compares this behavior to the behavior of the 4 kinds of flawed lords: the foolish lord, the lord who is too clever, the cowardly lord, and the lord who is too strong. All of these behaviors cause the destruction of their family lines and domains. First, the foolish lord, also referred to as doltish, silly, or stupid, lacks common sense and is for the most part conceited and selfish. He is obsessed with excursions, sightseeing, moon watching, flower viewing, poetry, linked verse, no, and the performing arts. As far as the martial arts are concerned, Although he sometimes receives instruction in archery, swordsmanship, horse riding, and firearms, his benighted frame of mind means he cannot devote himself to mastering the most basic skills, and ends up going through the motions as if they were merely a performance. He flatters himself as being a great lord. He thinks that everything he does is exceptionally good. Sounds like Donald Trump, no? His sycophantic retainers continue to sing his praises, and as many as 9 out of 10 of his men will curry favour while behaving inappropriately. There are many bad men in his group. This is only natural, as everything the foolish lord does negates reason. Wicked retainers rise, and so others either imitate them or quit their posts. Second is the lord who is too clever. This kind of lord is generally vulgar, rude, and conceited. He is also downcast when things do not go his way. An excellent samurai, whether of high or low rank, will not become arrogant when matters are going to plan, and does not become disheartened when smitten with bad luck. This is because he is wise and gallant. An inconsiderate lord, such as the one who is too clever, lacks discretion and is actually a fool. He is destined to regularly fail in his responsibilities. Above all, the lord who is too clever harbours many impish desires, and he chooses second-rate plots of land to give his retainers when allocating fiefs. The lord who is too clever will say things with an air of authority, but his true meaning is callous and vile. The lord who is too clever will be haughty, and thinks that anything he does is above reproach. He takes no notice of past teachings of wise men, believing that his way is the only way. Sometimes he may call for a learned monk to consult on a specific subject, or will read some books. Forever convinced of his own cleverness, he will proclaim to have understood all after listening to only a little. He will interpret the words of a wise man in accordance with his own wicked desires. The lord who is too clever is crude, and ranks sex above all else. If victorious in battle, he will inevitably be far away from the action. In spite of this, he will tell tall tales of how he crushed the enemy single-handedly. He will be jealous of his own brave retainers, and afraid that his lies will be discovered. He may even expel them or have them killed. Third, the cowardly lord, or the lord who is too weak, is constantly moaning like a woman. He is envious of wealthy people and prefers subordinates who curry favour with him. Being unobservant, imprudent, uncompassionate, and inconsiderate, he is a terrible judge of character. The cowardly lord is stubborn and cruel, and squanders his time mired in indecision. Having a heart full of foolishness, everyone views him as an effeminate stooge. Even with 20 or 30,000 or 50 or 60,000 men, there will not even be 100 who appreciate him, eh? Such a narrow-minded, incompetent lord acts as if he were accomplished, but does not know how to discern which of his men are good or bad, and indiscriminately hands out stipends, fiefs, money, and rice. He's especially slow at making up his mind, so things go round in circles with little being accomplished. A cowardly lord ignores his obligations and seeks only to enhance his reputation. He thinks about the present and not about the future. He pampers his supporters without determining whether they are truly loyal and brave or cowardly, and passively agrees with what the majority says is good. In this way, It is difficult to discriminate between what is meritorious behavior and what is not, and so his retainers lose their drive to be daring and fearless. The fourth flawed lord is one who is too strong. He is bold, astute, eloquent, and persuasive. He is wiser than other men and despises any form of weakness. He never loses his temper and is at no time irrational, so no one would assume that he was not an ideal lord. But this is not true. When a house elder is in a position to offer some advice, he thinks that such a triviality will put his lord in a foul mood, so out of 10 issues, he will only mention 5, and even then 3 issues will not be broached adequately. The strong lord will therefore start to think that advice from his house elders is hardly worth listening to, and as a result, he becomes absorbed in his own ideas. As the father of such a lord happens to have been famous, he will reluctantly meet with the old householders. They will engage in various discussions, but under such a headstrong young master, their guidance is futile. Out of desperation, they say whatever comes into their heads, and contrive all manner of inoperative proposals without thinking the consequences through. Meddling samurai see opportunities for a change of guard and try to catch their lord's eye for promotion to house elder, although their advice has no substance. Furthermore, a lord who is too strong will always be in high spirits, but this will be his downfall. Battles that should not have been engaged in will result in needless casualties, and crucial encounters will be lost, with many good men perishing in the process. If good men die, apish samurai will tarry, and overall conduct in the ranks will deteriorate. If his military clout unravels this way, the lord will conversely earn a reputation for weakness. Thus, a lord who is too strong will be consigned to history as being no different to the weak lords. Kosaka considered competence to discern the qualities of one's men, the aptitude to instantaneously judge situations, and being benevolent in character as basic traits necessary in the consummate warlord. A good warlord was able to rouse his men into performing deeds of merit in battle, and he was certain to reward them appropriately. He also stresses that the quality of the lord dictates the quality of his subordinates. Generally, a samurai of lowly rank, who is a buffoon, is so because his lord is a dunderhead. An ox will follow an ox, and a horse will follow a horse. Survival of the clan depended on the caliber of its leader. The warlord needed to be a role model to his men in order to carry the day. In the course of the Tokugawa period, such precedents were grafted onto the commission of rank and file samurai who had become privileged custodians of their communities.